What does the road to victory look like in week 2 against the Patriots? I'm glad you asked. We're getting into it here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. Today on the show, kind of going over some final bookkeeping for who's available on both sides of this matchup. We kind of heard about some updates with Keon White and Christian Gonzalez for New England. We heard about Austin Jackson, Benito Jones, Darren Waller on the Dolphins side of things. And then looking at the depth chart. And I think what makes this game hard to peg and nail down is a lot of the variables that I think are going to decide the game are not on paper talent. How talented is player X versus player Y? Because this Dolphins team, it felt like the talent that was applicable in week 1 due to faulty game script or negative game script or turnovers early or a faulty game plan, all of it kind of led to this perfect storm of bad variables that bled across 60 minutes and gave you this really bad result. And it's one of the things that I managed to talk to. If you guys missed it, it came together late last night, but my phone went off around 5:30, and it was Teron Armstead, and he asked me if I wanted to come on the set, which is his podcast over on his YouTube channel. So I went on with Teron at 7:15 last night. We chopped it up for about an hour, and it was great. We talked Dolphins, we talked week 2 matchups, we did some personnel stuff, but when we talked about Miami in particular, it was adjustments on either side of the ball, and we'll get into that and what that can look like to kind of give you a path to victory, and then where New England is different than Indianapolis. But we'll start with who's suiting up in this game, and I am a little bummed that we're not going to get Christian Gonzalez, because this was the central thesis earlier in the week. I wrote something for A to Z. I believe we talked about here on the program. I'm looking for clarity, right? And teams that are down at certain position groups, like I want that measure for success on what you look like when you're playing somebody else's best. And several people have rightfully pointed out, well, if you can't get the passing game going against New England without Christian Gonzalez, here's your sign, right? And that is a very valid point. But Christian Gonzalez is one of, in my opinion, one of the best corners in football from a talent perspective. But he hasn't practiced since the end of July. He's now missed the last 2 weeks. And the domino effect for what that's going to look like for the Patriots and the secondary is not a small thing. They have Carlton Davis, who they signed in free agency, as one of the corners, Alex Austin, Marcus Jones, and then safeties are Craig Woodson, who's a 4th-round rookie out of Cal, who I liked, and Jalen Hawkins. That's the secondary in New England, right? And I think you can look at, again, you want to get into comparing and contrasting what the Colts have, what the Colts had, what their questions were, and then what the Patriots have. Without Christian Gonzalez, I look at this group, it should be a matchup area for you. But there's other matchups, and we'll get into it when we get into the offensive advantages and disadvantages. Miami will have their own disadvantages in this game. It was revealed this morning when Mike McDaniel talked to the media that Austin Jackson will officially be down. So it's Larry Borom at right tackle, which I would not be super concerned with in a vacuum. But then you pair it with It's presumably Keon Smith because he got the first call up um, last week and got 44 reps of action. I didn't think he played particularly inspired, but maybe getting a rep of opportunities all week long to prep as a starter will yield a better result. And he's playing next to Aaron Brewer. But that blind side of the Dolphins offensive line is officially going to be different. They're officially going to have Darren Waller down for this game as well. I am recording this. It's about 2:30 in the afternoon on Friday. So injury report comes out at 4. Any roster transactions will be announced at 4. And that's one thing I do have circled. And if we get anything of significance, I'll try to get back and drop a pinned comment on the YouTube channel if you're a YouTube consumer, kind of give you guys the update if something comes through from a transaction standpoint. But that's something that I'm looking at because this Julian Hill, Tanner Connor pairing and being the only ones available can't happen. So maybe there's some context clues if there's not a roster move for Jalen Wright, who practiced and was back at practice. Maybe that bodes well for him, and maybe there's a tight end elevation that you can go with there. But those 3 players on offense, you're making concessions with. Jalen Waddle expected to play, so that's good news for you as well. Benito Jones is going to be down as well. And I'm going to drop a hot take now. I think Jordan Phillips, I would, any rep that you would give to Benito Jones, I would rather give to Jordan Phillips. For both, I think he anchors better, but then also I think he has more ability to convert power. And I think there's a long-term appeal that also exists there. So I think you're getting short-term benefits and also significant long-term gains. Jordan Phillips for me would be in that spot, no questions asked, would not look back. It was cool talking to Teron last night, and he talked about Jordan and kind of his build and what that profile will eventually look like as a pass rusher. And Anthony Weaver mentioned the same thing on Thursday during the press conference. Right now, the ceiling there on passing downs is going to probably be dependent on the line mates and how they run their twists and stunts in games. But there is an ability there. And I think that's the thing that really stood out to me about Jordan was when he was locking horns with Colts blockers, and that included Quentin Nelson. He dropped Quentin Nelson to a knee on 1 rep. He plays on the plus side line of scrimmage. And that's a really valuable piece of the puzzle for somebody who lives in the A-gaps the way that Jordan did. And Jordan had, was his 33 snaps on defense, and more than half of them were in the A-gaps, either in a head up over the center or a shade in a 1 or a 2. And that was Benito Jones played 6 snaps as an A-gap defender in week 1. Almost all of your A-gap snaps went to Jordan Phillips. So that's kind of the ups and the downs. It was interesting to find out that Ethan Bonner was back at practice. Miami, with the Storm Duck injury, was reported he was in a boot this week. So maybe you just flip a 1-for-1 there and you have everybody else active, and that would be Jack Jones, Rasul Douglas, Juju Brents, Ethan Bonner, Jason Marshall, and you can roll with that group plus the safeties. Kind of expect there to be a shift at safety this week. And I know Chris Kaufman's been on this all week with 3 yards per carry. It stood out to me in training camp listening to Anthony Weaver kind of unprompted mention the name Dante Trader on more than one occasion. And then he ends up getting over 20. He gets 22 snaps on defense in week 1. And Anthony Weaver tactfully explained the 2nd and 20 touchdown pass that was conceded and said Storm Duck rerouted so well that it caused the safety to not perceive it as 2 verticals. So he didn't split the difference between the 2, and it left you in a bad spot. Well, as he's explaining that, by extension, the extension of blame per Anthony Weaver's mind goes to Ifiatu Melifonwu, who was the other safety on that play. Now, Weaver didn't mention him by name, which is different than what Mike McDaniel chose to do with the Zach Sealer rep earlier in the week. But Melifonwu played 47 snaps. Melifonwu played 47 snaps and 12 of them came in the second half, 6 in the third and 6 in the fourth. And Dante Trader really came on in the back half of that game. So from a personnel availability, who is first men up, who are dressing for the game, that's kind of where we're at. Now, where are the advantages on either side of the ball? That's what we're going to get into next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. It's almost time for the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. And this week's choice, who delivered in a big way, unfortunately is an AFC East player, but not one that plays for the Dolphins. It's Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen, who had over 250 passing yards in the fourth quarter of a 41-40, 16-point comeback victory over 16 unanswered points. Fourth quarter comeback at home in week 1 against the Baltimore Ravens. When the pressure was on, Allen came through, no hesitation, no delay. Just like Josh Allen delivered for the Bills, DoorDash delivers on your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season long, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms do apply. Promo period through November 18th. Football season is officially here, of course, and FanDuel's making sure you are ready to kick off with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet $5, and if that $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it makes it super easy to play no matter how you like to play, whether that's spreads, player props, same-game parlays, jumping in on live action. You name it, it makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching the Dolphins or keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. Quick, easy, and the best way to use and add a little bit of extra energy to your Sundays. The Dolphins favored at home on Sunday by 1.5 points, despite the disastrous week 1 debacle in Indianapolis. We will see. If you are ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. A little surprised by the spread, but New England is a team that has its own fair share of disarray. So let's talk about the Dolphins' offensive advantages. First and foremost, the Dolphins will be at home. So all of your pre-snap orchestration, right? You should have a better chance to not have the communication issues that Frank Smith talked about on Thursday that were apparent on Sunday that have been kind of a central theme across several years of this regime. And I did ask Teron Armstead on the set yesterday. I can't recommend you guys go check it out enough, not just because I was on, but because Teron was amazing. He was so insightful. He was very gracious with his time. He invited me to stay longer than the segment that we had planned. But I asked him a little bit about like motions and shifts in Miami's offense. And Teron's point was kind of the identity of the offense and how it's built is that plays packaged are designed to have a similar presentation until the snap to show the same thing to maximize the impact of the plays. And you can get into whatever football ideological points you would like to make about how effective that is or is not and how you can do that on the road. And Dan Campbell had a Lions reporter ask him about this, and he referenced his road shift and motion splits versus home and said, go look him up. If you think this was just, we didn't do the same offense we had when Ben Johnson was here. So there's some really thought-provoking stuff that I'm kind of working through right now on that front. But Miami being at home should eliminate some more of the communication hurdles that you have to clear to run the kind of offense that you want to ideally run, without having to deal with the crowd noise and communication and getting guys lined up and trying to do so on time. So that's an advantage that the Dolphins have. From a personnel standpoint, we mentioned the Patriots secondary. No Christian Gonzalez leaves the Patriots active roster corners as Carlton Davis is a good player. Alex Austin, Marcus Jones, Charles Woods. That's it. Those are the active 53-man roster corners that exist for New England. At corner, they do have Kobe Minor, a 7th-round rookie who I liked out of Missouri, who I was a little ticked off. Sorry, out of Memphis. A little ticked off that the Patriots got their hands on him. Miles Battle, and then also Corey Ballantyne. So some practice squad elevation candidates that do exist. But it's not a deep group. And it's not really, outside of Carlton Davis, it's not really an experienced group. To go with safeties that they moved on from Jabril Peppers, they waived Jabril Peppers. He signed in Pittsburgh. He joined everybody else that's ever had a successful season in the history of mankind, all joining Pittsburgh this season. And they tried to get rid of Kyle Duggar, who they signed a contract extension with last year, that they tried to move on from. So there's a lot of youth. That's a matchup, especially when you add in the second-level players in the back seven with Robert Spillane, who's a smart player, but he's not a dynamic athlete. Marte Mapu's a dynamic athlete, but he converted from safety to linebacker full-time this year. You look at it on paper and you say, hey, misdirection-oriented offense, a lot of speed, a lot of horizontal stress. If we can force them to honor the width of the field and not just present the threat of the rest of the field, you should have spacing in which you can attack. Should being the key word. But if you come out and you execute on the offensive side of the ball, whether that's pass protection and protection calls, whether that's your route landmarks and timing and getting off of press coverage, whether that's the quarterback executing the reads, if that's the combination blocks at the point of attack, if that's anything you asked Tanner Conner to do in week one, if you don't have a better execution element than that, all these on paper things aren't going to matter. And I do think the Patriots do present some challenges with the front, with the Dolphins' defensive or offensive line interruptions. Milton Williams, Christian Barmore, those guys can create a little bit of chaos on the interior. And then you pair that with Harold Landry as a player who's very versed in playing for Mike Vrabel, and was very active in the first week for the pressure that he could facilitate. Keon White sounds like he's out. Caleb Von Chason's a former first-round draft choice who seems to have finally kind of elevated into at least a high floor player. I don't think he's a super, like, if you told me you got Pat Paul on Caleb Von Chason all game, I'd say I'd bet Pat wins that matchup the vast majority of the time in isolation. But it's now the attention goes to the other side, and what are you choosing to do with Keon Smith / Larry Borom, who, again, I think if you had James Daniels inside and Borom next to him, I'd be like, okay, like, send a little extra help his way. Maybe don't turn the center away from that side quite as often, and we're going to be in good shape. Like, I feel like we could operate just fine. But it's both of them next to each other that you're worried about the communication. You're worried about handling a twitchy player like Milton Williams, who has a lot of power, versus Keon in pass protection with true pass sets. I'm worried about Larry handling the speed of Harold Landry. And that's why I go back to what I said yesterday. If I'm Mike McDaniel and I win the toss, I want the ball. I want to have a really good opening script that's not a fact-finding script. It's a manufactured touches to get some points on the board script. Because everybody has a little bit of different school of thought. And I'm not saying what bucket Mike McDaniel falls into, but some game scripts are, hey, we want to show a bunch in the opening set because we want to see what their checks are to this formation or this motion. We want to see how they line up or how they match personnel when we put this out here for the first time. Because then when I get a 3rd and 6 later in the game, I want to know what personnel grouping I'm getting so I know what kind of play to call to attack it. Versus some opening scripts are, I'm going to empty the chamber up front because I want to get points on the board. Going to get into the defensive side of the ball against New England. That's next. Make a game prediction. Make sure you guys stick with us. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward for those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, they move culture, and they keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward, unfortunately, does not belong to a Miami Dolphin. It belongs to Kenny Moore. Kenny Moore had a pressure opportunity off the left-hand side early in the game. It was 3-0 Indianapolis. Dolphins get a 6-yard gain on 1st and 10. They try to go tempo. Kenny Moore comes screaming in off the right side of the offense and creates a strip sack onto a Tagovailoa, and it moved this game forward towards the ultimate 25-point route that it would end up being. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning, and just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move or be moved. I would not be mad about some of these thought-provoking ad reads having a chance to talk about some Dolphins performances next week. I appreciate not just having a script, right? You're given, hey, these are our partners. This is the messaging that they want to deliver. You want to try the products, and we encourage you to try the products. I stand by all of our partners and the products that they give. But when they give you some leeway and say, hey, we want you to use your creative muscles and make it applicable to the topic at hand, and you lose by 25 points, that's a stressor. It is a stressor. Now, here's hoping we can stress Drake May a little bit. One thing I did not mention with the Patriots and their defense, their linebackers coach is going to be serving as the defensive coordinator in this game. Terrell Williams, the Patriots defensive coordinator, unfortunately having a health scare. Some kind of health situation that's causing him to be away from the team right now. So best wishes to Terrell Williams, obviously. But that is an extra layer to the Patriots defense that could serve as a complicating factor against Miami. When the Patriots have the ball, I look at this offensive line, 2 rookies next to each other on the left side. This would be where I'm giving work to Zach Sealer and either Bradley Chubb or Chop Robinson. This is the side I want to work. Now, if Morgan Moses, who sounds like he's going to be questionable for this game, ends up not going, a 7th-round rookie, Marcus Bryant, steps in at the other spot. That would give the Patriots 3 rookies on their offensive line. And you could talk about Drake May and the fit that he is and how dynamic Travion Henderson is. If you get 3 rookies on the offensive line that you're going against in week 2, and it's in Miami, I would expect that to be the kind of mismatch that can help you dictate, in the same way that I look at New England's defensive line against what Miami's question marks are and say that's a matchup that favors New England. I think that the biggest difference is the Patriots skill group has a 2nd-round rookie in Travion Henderson, who's the most attractive player, in my opinion, on the entire roster. Hunter Henry's an effective receiving tight end. You kind of know what he is. There's not a great deal of ceiling there, but he's very consistent. Steph Diggs, I don't know how this experiment's going to go. Keyshawn Butte's been a productive player. And then it's young guys like Pop Douglas and Kyle Williams, guys that don't have a bunch of physicality. I think that's when I reflect on Indianapolis, and part of the reason why they had so much success, it was obviously the tight end with Tyler Warren, but then also Michael Pittman being a physical receiver, Alec Pierce being a physical receiver. They didn't really get tagged too bad by like the Josh Downses of the world. Now, you got caught on some pressures where you're bringing the nickel, and then the safety's got to play from 15 yards off, and he's got to try and rally and tackle. Sure. But I think New England does not have the same physicality across the board in their skill set that I felt like complicated some of your challenges for Miami. Now, the explosive elements of Kyle Williams as a rookie receiver and Pop Douglas as a guy you can manufacture touches for, it's going to stress your spacing, which was not good in week 1 for Miami. And that's a point of concern for sure. You have Drake May operating the second game in this Josh McDaniels offense. I think that's another variable that you would think the Dolphins would have an advantage in, but they didn't play like they had any continuity of their scheme. And I actually did this for A to Z Sports. I want to pull this up because I want the numbers to be accurate because it was meaningful for me to look at the numbers. The Dolphins' defensive side of the ball. First-year players. Kenneth Grant played 44 snaps. Jason Marshall played 34. Jordan Phillips played 33, and Dante Trader played 22. That's significant amount of snaps. 133 snaps for rookies on the Dolphins defense in week 1. And then when you include the two-year players that took reps, and that was Storm Duck and Chop Robinson, it was 200 snaps. It was 199 combined defensive snaps by first and second-year players. And then you got another 112 from Rasul Douglas and Jack Jones, neither of which were with the team when training camp started. So, fool you once, shame on me. Oh, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Kind of got fooled here by, scheme continuity. Well, you didn't have player continuity, right? And it bit you. The idea of continuity existed, but the actual continuity with the personnel was not. So, eager to see what kind of growth and leaps in consistency and execution are going to be able to exist for Miami from week 1 to week 2 against a different opponent and being at home for that. So consider me intrigued. Who do I pick to win the game? My pick to win the game comes down to simply this. I didn't think Mike McDaniel had great energy today on the podium, and it's Friday. I'm sure it's been a long week. I'm sure it's been a tiresome week. I'm sure it's very stressful. You know, the talk about your job all the time, and the hot seat element, and the must win, and the players only meetings, and it's a lot. And I'm sympathetic to that. And I don't think Mike McDaniel's energy is going to define the success or failure of the game. I think it could potentially help, and I think it could potentially hurt if the team plays flat like they did last week. That's going to be very demoralizing. It's going to be very deflating because the players staged I don't want to say an intervention already, but they took matters into their own hands already. I look at the matchups. I feel like the trenches on either side of the ball defensively have favorable matchups. I think the Dolphins do have better skill players. The Dolphins are at home. The Dolphins are a little bit more rocky right now. And they're very difficult to predict the non-X's and O's or non-on-paper personnel matchups. It's very difficult. My pick comes down to this. You could say Tua Tagovailoa is a lot of things. He's polarizing first and foremost. And I'm not getting into the ceiling with Tua and the big picture conversations around what the ceiling is with a team with Tua. Tua Tagovailoa is a better quarterback than what he put on tape on Sunday against the Colts. His feet, his timing has to be better. His eyes and his progressions and his decision-making has to be better. Was that just Lou Anarumo caught you with your pants down week 1? And we've had Tua have some bad stretches of play, but that's amongst the worst games I've ever seen Tua play. And in years past, even when he's played poorly, he himself has found ways to bounce back. And this is not a juggernaut of a team that I think you're going in saying, man, we're really outgunned here. We're going to have some problems. I think Tua with the Dolphins at home, I was a little inspired by some of what Anthony Weaver had to say. I thought Anthony Weaver showcased some great leadership in his press conference yesterday. The defensive side of the ball and some of the adjustments that they're making. He fell on the sword for Willie Gay not playing any defensive snaps. All that. And I don't think Tua's going to be like, hey, I'm a top 3 quarterback in the NFL, and everybody around the NFL is going to be like, yeah, we agree. But I can't fathom the end happening that fast and it being all-encompassing and then including execution things that Tua has thrived with for so long. I think Tua will play better. I think the Dolphins will eke out a close win in week 2 against New England. I'm going to go 24-20 final score. But again, it's a very difficult team to project right now because you just don't know where the headspace is at with the team. They're going to tell us on Sunday, though, and I'm looking forward to the clarity. Kyle Krabs, you can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team Every day. I appreciate you guys as always checking the show. Make sure you go check out The Set with Teron Armstead on YouTube. I was on for the Thursday live stream Thursday night. Check it out. Kyle Krabs, Locked On Dolphins. Hope to see y'all again soon.